أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا. Many of us have experienced the deep grief that accompanies the loss of a loved one. When we lose a grandparent, a brother, a sister, a child, a parent, it can push us into some of the deepest, darkest areas of grief. And it is a type of grief that we carry with us for the rest of our lives. We can never forget it. And of all of the times after their passing that the pain is most acute, it is the first night where it begins to settle into reality. And you truly begin to realize that they're not coming back. This is the case when we lose one loved one. What about Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad? On the day of Ashura, so many members of this holy household are killed. So many youth in the prime of in the prime ages, they lose their lives, their futures, their hopes, their dreams. We can only imagine what the survivors in the camps must be going through. And they begin to feel insecure now, because they have no more protectors, the women and the children. There is no more Qasim, no Akbar, no Abbas, and there is no Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. And how can they not feel insecure when now they camp under the stars? And now that the head of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein has been severed, the enemies of Allah, they turn their gaze towards the camps of his women and his children. Assalamu ala khamisi ashab al-kisa. Peace be upon the fifth of the people of the cloak. Assalamu ala Ghareebah al-Ghuraba. Peace be upon the loneliest of the lonely. Assalamu ala shaheed al-shuhada. Peace be upon the greatest of martyrs. Assalamu ala man bakat malaikatu sama. Peace be upon the one for whom the angels wept. Assalamu ala man uriqa bil dhulmi dam. Peace be upon the one whose blood was shed unjustly. Assalamu ala al-mudam al-mustabah. Peace be upon the one for whom people came and made the shedding of his blood halal. Assalamu ala al-ru'us al-mufarraqati an al-abdan. Peace be upon the heads that were severed from their bodies. Bibi Zainab, she looks at the body of her brother Aba Abdullah al-Hussein and she says, Ya Muhammad, O my dear father Ali, O Ja'far, O Hamza. This is Aba Abdullah al-Hussein in the wilderness, who lies on the sands of Karbala. If only the skies had crashed into the earth, if only the mountains had dispersed in the deserts. The day of Qiyamah, it is beginning for Ali Muhammad. Till Imam Hussein alayhi salam, the women, they were alive, they were protected, they had some sort of protection. Yes, they were thirsty, yes, they were grieving, yes, they were struggling, but at least they knew in their tents they had some safety. But the moment the men of Ali Muhammad are killed, there is no more protection. It is time for Bibi Zainab to become Abbas and to protect the chadars of the women. It is time for her to become Imam and to protect the women and children. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tested various prophets through different means and calamities. Yaqub lost his son Yusuf. Nuh alayhi salam lost his son, needed consoling by Allah. Ibrahim alayhi salam could not bear to see the throat of his son cut. But in Karbala, there were no limits, there were no veils, there were no barriers. All of these atrocities and horrors were committed. For Imam Hussein alayhi salam, it was a test like no other. None of these prophets were 3 days thirsty. None of them spent the day picking up the bodies of their family members, and none of them knew that as soon as they were martyred, their women and children would fall prey to the wolves of Arabia. When we talk about sabr, O Imam as-Sajjad, you are the tallest of mountains. Whenever he looked at his sisters or his nieces, he remembered what happened on that day of Shaam Ghareebah. He remembered them throughout. He remembered the dungeons of Shaam. Whenever an animal would be slaughtered, he would remember that his father was killed whilst he was thirsty. Our salams upon the Imam who was too sick to stand, but would have to bear the heaviest of loads. The events of Karbala were burned into their minds. Imam Hussein alayhi salam, his throat was cut. Assalamu ala al-Hussein alladhi samahat nafsuhu bimuhjatih. Peace be upon Hussein who sacrificed himself right up to the final drops of blood within his heart. وَالشِّمْرُ جَالُسٌ عَلَى صَدْرِكَ. And that time Shimr was sitting on your chest. وَمُولِغٌ سَيْفُهُ عَلَى نَحْرِكَ. And he quenched his sword with the blood of your throat. قَابِضٌ عَلَى شَيْبَتِكَ بِيَدِهِ. Grabbing your beard with his hand. ذَابِحٌ لَكَ بِمُحَنَّدِهِ. He slew you with his sword. قَدْ سَكَنَتْ حَوَاسُكَ. That your faculties faded and your breath became shallow and ceased. وَسُبِيَ أَهْلُكَ كَالْعَبِيدِ. And your family members were captured like slaves. What must the daughter of Bibi Fatima Zahra must be seeing now? After the last of the Panjatar is martyred, these moments of Qiyamah, they begin. And to set the scene for Shaam Ghareebah, when the sun set and the light of the sun went out, it was an atmosphere of horror for Ali Muhammad. Just think about it. If someone enters one of our houses and they are an assailant or a robber, and we feel so insecure. This was the place that we were supposed to have protection. Who knows what they're going to do next? Ali Muhammad are not only in this situation, but they have been thirsty for 3 days. They are already broken. They've seen the bodies of their loved ones, and now the assailants come. Some of them have lost their fathers, some have lost their brothers, their sons. They are in a minority surrounded by a majority, but they won't even have a few moments to mourn. They are already broken when the army of Yazid comes. Assalamu ala al-'itrati al-Ghareebah. Peace be upon the family who is nearby the place of martyrdom. Assalamu ala al-mahtuk ikhba. Peace be upon him whose tents were violated. The cruel people, they came towards the tents of Ali Muhammad, and those tents which contained the family from where the religion oriented, they went with their fire, and they set them on fire, so all of the women and children were running out. As they came forward, they said, they had the audacity to say, burn the houses of the oppressors. Just imagine the scene. After all have died, the children are running screaming between assailant here and there. There is chaos. The only light seems to come from the fire that is burning their own tents. The ladies are panicking. They don't know what to do, where to go. They have no protection. They have no tents. The daughters of Ali Muhammad, the daughters from the family of revelation, were going from one tent to the other whilst the fire was chasing them, whilst the enemies were chasing them with spears and swords. Some of the orphans were running while their very garments had caught fire, screaming to be helped. They had not just lost their loved ones, now they will watch as all their property burns in front of them, all they have left in this world. Imagine what Rabab must have felt after she's lost Ali al-Asghar. Now she watches as the last memory, as his cradle burns in front of her. As the chaos ensued, they did not know what to do. The mothers were separated from their children. Some of the children, they ran into the wilderness. Nobody knows what happened to them because they could not survive there. Others ran from tent to tent, trying to find some sanctuary. Others just begged that they would be spared from these wicked oppressors. This scene, it was burned into the memories of Ali Muhammad. Imam Zain al-Abidin could never forget this. Bibi Zainab could never forget this whenever they would look at their relatives. Even the body of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, as they were looting the tents, they took everything from his body. He kept some tattered, broken clothes underneath, so that they wouldn't steal that. But when one man, al-La'in, he came to the body of Imam Hussein, he saw that there was everything had been taken apart from those tattered clothes and one ring on his finger. So the cruelty of these men knew no bounds, for rather than taking the ring off, he cut off the finger of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. The veils were snatched, the rings were pulled, the necklaces torn, the earrings were taken out whilst they were still in the ears, ripping the ears of the young children, one after the other. It was only madness in Karbala. Someone went up to Fatima, one of the daughters of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and tried to rob her of her jewelry. But when Fatima looked up, she saw that he was crying. And she said, "Why are you crying?" He said, "Because I am robbing the daughters of Ali Muhammad." And she said, "If you know that you are robbing the daughters of Ali Muhammad, let me go." And his worldly greed came in. He said, "If I don't take it, someone else will. This necklace will be mine." There was no mercy in Karbala. Their hearts were sealed. Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, he was so sick he could not move, he couldn't stand up on his own. Shimr ibn al-Jawshan comes forward, ready to strike on the Imam. Bibi Zainab came forward. She was Abbas, protector of the camps. She ran in front of Shimr, threw herself on the body of Imam al-Sajjad and said, "Leave him alone. If you want to kill him, you must first kill me." She even took him out from the burning tent and saved Imamah on that day. They took the body of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein as if the burning of the tents wasn't enough, as if leaving them stranded in the desert wasn't enough, as if taking them prisoners wasn't enough. They took the body of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. In front of everybody, they took it in the front, and they gathered the horses in order to come and trample him. Umar ibn Sa'd, he asks, "Who will volunteer to trample the chest of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein?" Shimr ibn al-Jawshan came forward. Asad bin Malik, he said, "I came forward and I made sure I didn't take ordinary horses to trample the body. We looked for the strongest, the most robust, the most powerful of horses, that we could truly crush his body into dust." The same body that Rasulullah used to carry, the same body that Rasulullah used to kiss. And the members of the tents, the people of the family of Ali Muhammad, they hear in the distance, and they see as the bones of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, they break. They hear as if it is the sound of plates, as if it is the sound of ceramic breaking. Our salams upon Bibi Zainab, condolences on the shahada of your brother. Salam on those ladies who were under the sky, under the carpet of stars, amongst the ashes of the tent, hearing the breaking bones of the body of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. When family members die, you give them time, you give them some room to heal. But alas, it is trauma after trauma after trauma. Who can recover from something as horrendous as this? Imam Hussein alayhi salam, his body is crushed. Even in death, he is not left alone. The family of Ali Muhammad, they are then going to be taken as prisoners. Bibi Zainab, she looks at her brother Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, and she looks at the body that has been cut, the body that has been torn, that has been looted, has been injured, has been crushed. For a long time she looks at that body. God knows what she was contemplating. And all she could say was, "Ya Allah, please accept the sacrifice of my brother Abu Abdullah al-Hussein." We try and bury the dead bodies as soon as we can. We try and give them the relief of the grave. But the body of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein and Ali Muhammad and his friends and companions, they would be left to the vultures of the desert, to the sun of Arabia, until they were buried 3 days later. No ghusl, no care, no compassion. The torment had to go further. They even found the corpse of Ali al-Asghar. They dug up the corpse of a 6-month-old baby, severed his head and put it on a spear. And they put all of the heads at the front of the camps so that everybody could see the severed heads of their loved ones. They could see their fathers and their brothers and their children. Anytime they would cry, they would be whipped by the whips of Shimr ibn al-Jawshan and the enemies. Assalamu ala ru'us al-mushalat, peace be upon the heads that were put upon the lances. Such was the condition of the bodies that when the Banu Asad came on the third day to try and bury them, they said, we don't know what to do. We don't know what body belongs to whom. How are we supposed to bury them in the desert? Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows about the strength of Bibi Zainab. She ran this way and that, through the fire, in between the assailants, into the wilderness and the desert, to try and gather as many of the children as possible, because they were being crushed under the hooves of the horses, even by accident in the chaos. She consoled the mothers that lost their children. She consoled the wives that had been widowed. She consoled the children that were orphaned. She stayed awake for the whole night looking out for them so that no more horrors could take place. So much grief, and yet she still did not have time to mourn for her own children, and she still prayed her salah and her salatul layl. But oh, Bibi Zainab, she had no strength left in her body. She was not able to stand up for Salatul Layl, so she prayed while she was sitting down. The sacrifice of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, it penetrated through time and through space. Ibn Asakir, he mentioned in his Tariq that on the day of Ashura, Ibn Abbas, he was sleeping. And when he was sleeping, he saw in a dream that Rasulullah came to him with tears flowing down his face, with his hair disheveled, and he had a bottle of blood in his hand. Ibn Abbas said, Ya Rasulullah, what has happened to you? Rasulullah said, I have been in Karbala. I have seen what they have done to my grandfather Hussein. They have slaughtered my grandson, Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Even Rasulullah past the grave was there to see the trauma that took place. We read in Ziyarat Nahiya, وَسُبِيَ أَهْلُكَ كَالْعَبِيدِ, your family were captured like slaves. وَصُفِدُوا فِي الْحَدِيدِ فَوْقَ أَقْدَابِ الْمُطَيَّات, bound with iron chains atop camels. تَلْفَحُ وُجُوهَهُمْ حَرُّ الْهَارِجِ هَاجِرَاتِ, with midday heat scorching their faces. يُسَاقُونَ فِي الْبَرَارِ وَالْفَلَوَاتِ, they were driven across the deserts and the wastelands. Their hands, they were chained to their neck. They were paraded around the markets. Woe upon the wicked transgressors. Not only were they not allowed to mourn whilst they were transferred through the desert, they had chains around their arms, around their necks, and any time they cried, any time they showed any remorse, they would be whipped by Shimr ibn al-Jawshan and the other enemies of Allah. They were paraded in front of the strangers, taken from town to town where people were celebrating. People would throw rocks at them, they would throw boiling water at them, they would rub salt into their wounds, saying Allah had destroyed them. But O prisoners of Ali Muhammad, your tests are only just beginning. O Rabah, you think that your sacrifice of Ali al-Asghar is where your contributions will end? You've lost your husband, you've lost your baby. Your only hope now remains in Bibi Ruqayya. But alas, you cannot place much hope in Bibi Ruqayya, because soon she will be crying for her father in the dungeons of Shaam, and they will give her the severed head of her father, causing her to die from grief. And she will be buried, the one who wanted to return back to Medina the most, the one who wanted to go home the most. Till the day of judgment she was to be separated and buried in a strange land. Oh Layla, you must have been thinking about your son's last adhan. The dawn will come again, but never again will come the adhan of Ali al-Akbar. Bibi Zainab, your trials and tribulations have only just begun, for you will have to destroy the Khilafah and upend an empire. And oh Imam al-Sajjad, almost 3.5 decades of mourning await you. Every waking moment you will see the horrors of Karbala. Our salams upon the Imam whose Imamate started on the day of Shaam Ghareebah. Our salams upon the Imam who saw things that no other Imam saw. Our salams upon the Imam who would cry for another 34 years, remembering the horrors of Ashura, of Shaam Ghareebah, and the events that followed. لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين.